I am Jennifer Zwilling, the curator and director of artistic programs here at the Clay Studio. We would like to acknowledge that the Clay Studio is located on the homeland of the Lenape people and to pay respect and honor to their roles as caretakers of this land in the past, present, and future. Clare McComish is a visual artist from Belfast. Her studio practice concentrates mainly on ceramic and mixed media architectural works for private and public clients. Alongside her studio practice is an ongoing artist in residence post with Arts Care Northern Ireland. Clare graduated from the University of Ulster Faculty of Art and Design, Fine and Applied Art, Ceramics 2000. Since then, she's been the recipient of several individual artist awards for research, travel, and international residencies from the Arts Council of Northern Ireland. Clare has exhibited her work in Ireland, the UK, and the US. She's created public works for hospitals, parks, and a variety of community settings. More recently, she has been engaged as integrated public arts consultant for the Northern Ireland Hospice Rebuild Project. Previous to this, she was project coordinator for Landmarks Art and Public Program with Community Arts Partnership. I want to talk to you more about the hospice thing. We have a show next year called Clay as Care, thinking about well-being.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's a little bit out of date, some of that information, but yeah, it's all true, but maybe
it's on your website.
I need a personal assistant to update my social media and website stuff. But anyway, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, sometimes you just need the reminder when someone reads the old one.
Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, I need to update that. Yeah.
I mean, it all sounds great. Um, Michael Moore is reader in fine and applied arts at Ulster University, Belfast and Dublin based. Michael is a member, past council member, and honorary treasurer of the IAC. He's a recipient of grants and awards from the Japan Foundation, Creative Europe, the Design and Crafts Council of Ireland, Culture Ireland, Dublin City Council, and the Arts Councils of Ireland and Northern Ireland. He holds a Master of Arts from the National College of Arts and Design, Dublin, and is a UK HEA Fellow. Michael's works are held in numerous permanent national and international public collections of ceramic art. His research practice focuses on the handmade object that examines a blend of traditional and contemporary creative processes. These processes examine senses of location and place as thematic inspiration. Recent research outcomes have examined geographic positions, creative processes, exploring well-being and recovery, and written investigations with a focus on architecture and craft. Thank you to you both. I'm going to pause and say one more moment of joy, which I was too much in my plan conversations mode to think of, which is that I have my step granddaughter, Meta, here. She's been here helping me for 3 days as an intern. Thank you, Meta. It's been a joy to have her.
Oh,
Yay. Okay. So now I'm going to ask you the question that I mentioned when we did our little test call, and I think Claire's going to go first. And we're
Okay.
going to ask, how and why did you make the brave decision to make your life in art?
Well, I grew up in quite a big household. So mom and dad and 8 children. So I had 5 brothers, 2 sisters. And I had quite a few older siblings, and some of them were already very artistic. I had a sister who was a painter. I had another sister who then went to art college and had brother works in graphics, who Michael would know works in the same university as him. So it felt like a very natural thing to want to, study art. It just was second nature, and it was something that I enjoyed and that I was talented in. So I also was at a school, even though it was in a quite a working class area, it really encouraged the arts, which was kind of unusual for its time and place. So there was just this natural progression then to art college. Um, and I think just I always wanted for many years just to work for myself. It's not easy, but I think I just was driven by sort of blind optimism for many, many years because you kind of need it. And it's interesting that in this year, like I turned 50 myself this year, just like the Clay Studio. And for the first time ever, I've actually taken on a proper salary job. Now it's not full time. I've still kept it part time so I can still do my practice, but it's taken me until I turned 50 to actually sort of settle into something that is deemed like a regular job. Yeah, so I don't know. I just was always driven to work for myself and always driven to create my own work. It just was there as from when I was very small.
Yeah, that's that's great. I mean, and it's we still have this idea that like a proper job is something that
Mhm.
you get a paycheck as opposed to sort of the
You
blind
get a
optimism.
pension. You get a pension.
That's a good thing. And of course, here in the US, you don't get healthcare unless you have one of those.
Well, that's true, which is a bigger driver as well.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Um, but was there some aspect of your sort of inner life that you wanted, that you felt, it's one thing to have it all happening around you and it feels natural, but you must have had a drive to want to tell people about something that you felt passionate about, right? Like
I
expressing
think I
stuff.
just felt a passion to create and to make, you
Mm,
know. I think especially when you're a maker, you're working in clay, you're sort of working sort of, you're not even, it's indirect sometimes. You're making stuff with your hands and that's how you're creating, that's how you're telling your story. I find with a lot of my work, I don't quite understand any of it until about 10 years. I look back and go, oh,
Yeah.
right, okay, that's what that was all about. I've sort of been looking through all my old work going, oh, yeah, I can see a bit of a link to all of this now. It's very, when you are working and you're so busy, you rarely give yourself that time to sit back and actually reflect on your work.
mm,
Um, but yeah, I mean, but out of all my artistic siblings, I was the only one who went down the clay route. And so the actual making stuff with my hands
mm,
definitely it's a natural process for me and something I just felt attracted to from the get-go.
mm. Well, so that's interesting. Even within the group, you had this
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
drive. Were there people in your family? Probably yes, that were just made things all the time, fixed clothes, made quilts, that kind of stuff.
Um, yeah, well, yeah, no,
You have
not
8 kids.
necessarily. No, actually not necessarily. My father was more of a musician. But really I think it was my older siblings because when you grow up in a large family, you do tend to have almost like separate generations of you within the one sibling group.
Yeah.
So when I was a small child, I would have had siblings who were fully fledged adults, so
Yeah.
they would have been a big influence.
Right. And they're slightly cooler than your parents somehow. So
Hmm.
Oh, way cooler than parents.
they say no child grows up in the same house, even if there's only two. There's like, you always have that different relationship and different perspective. Your parents are in a different place. But when there's 8, I'm sure it's even more dramatic.
Yeah, no, when you're growing up in a household where your older siblings are into, David Bowie and punk rock and stuff, that you're definitely going to follow their lead.
That's great. Thank you, Claire. Michael, would you like to answer the same question? How and
Well,
why
yeah.
did you make a
Why?
brave decision? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, it was a complete leap of faith. Completely. Unlike many people I know, and indeed Claire, my it was not an artistic household. My dad was a civil servant. He passed away quite suddenly when I was quite young, so I was left with a very powerful, driven mother who wanted to make sure her two sons were going on the right direction. But prior to that, I always drew. I loved to draw, and I used to always do doodles. And I remember around the age of 9, I did a drawing in school. And it wasn't a particularly well connected teacher that I had. He was my teacher at the time, Mr. Quinn, but he gave me feedback on that drawing and he stuck it up on a wall for the year.
Hmm.
And then I went on to another teacher, as you do in Ireland. You have different teachers each year. But it was that feedback at 8 or 9 made me really think about I actually I could be good at this. And I stuck with that all the way through secondary school. But then when my mum was on her own, my grandfather became a very big part of my life. And he was a gardener in Guinness's in the Farm Lee in the Phoenix Park, but part of the Guinness estate. So he was always making, and he was always showing me how to make. And he used to fish, and my mum used to fish, and my mum insisted, and Alex Scott will remember this story. My mum insisted that I learn how to fly fish properly, so I wasn't allowed down on the river until I could cast properly. And then she insisted that I'm tie flies. And I presented those flies to Alex Scott at my interview in NCAD in 1986 as part of This Is What I Do. So I love to make. And I learned that through that kind of tactile and a very I grew up in my grandfather was based in Dublin, but it was a very rural family in a kind of very tiny little countryside at the bottom of a tiny lane near the Liffey. So it was all about making and doing, and that's really and that gave me the confidence to go through secondary school and then apply to college. And even at that time, Jennifer, the joke was, 1986 to 1990, you got a degree and a plane ticket because the economy was screwed in Ireland. I went to France for 2 years because there was opportunities, but I had this amazing opportunity. I couldn't resist to go and work for a potter in France, but it was a leap of faith completely from the start.
Hmm. That's great, and such a different kind of story, especially when you have, a parent who's trying to get you to do something practical to keep at this idea of making and making art. I'm interested. So did you know when you went to study with the potter in France that was clay already something that you were
Well,
focused
I should clarify. See, I did a BA in art and design education with a major study in ceramics.
Okay.
So I only really discovered clay after secondary school. And that was thanks to Alex Scott, who's here, who was a huge influence on me and still is. So it was the discovery of that material, both as a teaching, because we did a module called Visual Arts for Classroom, where we were modeling in clay. And actually, Alex and I modeled, Alex helped me modeling. We did self-portraits in clay. And then we'd life drawing every day, Tuesday, 8 hours a day, just every week, Tuesday. But it was the discovery of clay really in second year or fourth year that I knew it was clay. So I knew well before I went to, raku, as probably everyone knows, it's very dynamic. It's very kind of, I think it's quite, in a way, it sort of hooks people really early on, but there's maybe not, there's only a few people who can do it really, really brilliantly, like David Roberts in the UK. So I got hooked on raku, but then I sort of moved past that and started mark making and going back to landscape and cycling in Dublin mountains and taking drawings and then transferring them onto clay. But I only discovered, and I'll stop after this, it's only in 2017, 18, I discovered what I love I knew I loved clay, but I didn't really examine why. And it's because it's a material that converts. There's a conversion from clay to ceramic. So that conversion was a sort of, really that helped me to understand why I loved it. I always knew I loved it, but I started to dig into why, pardon the pun, sorry, why I loved it. 2017, 18. Yeah.
That's interesting. Oh, and I was about to ask why clay. So thank you for
well, it was always three-dimensional thinking for sure. And then the conversion process, that going from clay to ceramic, that permanency. And I guess the opportunity to scrub everything back to zero and not fire it if it's not successful. Yeah, there's that sort of, you can just, put it away, because the sustainability issue in ceramic is something we're all going to have to think about.
Yes, absolutely. The energy needed is pretty intense. Yeah, and I like that you said the word dig. No pun. I love the fact that when you talk to different artists who use different materials, they often use their material words when they're trying to think about concepts. Like woodworkers are talking about how they dovetail ideas together, etc. I'm gonna write a paper on it someday, but not right now. Quickly, Claire, you talked about clay, that you were drawn to it because you wanted to make with your hands. What else about it was what made you realize that it was your material?
I think I like the excitement of what was going to come out of the kiln. I like that excitement of, going into a glaze lab like some sort of crazy scientist, even though you don't have any chemistry background, and trying to mix up these recipes and hoping they'll work. It just seems so exciting and engrossing. And, we were lucky enough at the time, the ceramic department at the Art College in Belfast at the time was quite a big department. We used to bemoan about it years ago, but now I think, oh my God, that was amazing. And we had different tutors with different skill bases, and it was a big open plan space. So you were in the same space as maybe master students and things like that. So you were able to see what everybody else was doing. So it just felt like a really exciting place. It just and you were able to chop and change and go from coil building, the slab building, the slip
Mm.
cast, to everything, just I think there's something about the process. My sister-in-law, who's a painter background, fine art painter background, she always notices about me. I really like the process. I love the kind of all the components that you have to get together to make it all work. And almost like painting on canvas is like there's not enough pain involved for me to there's not enough things that can go wrong to keep my mind interested enough in the process. So it's like some sort of sadomasochistic streak, I think.
I mean,
Possibly.
I'm not arguing. I know a lot of potters. You might have hit on something there. But yeah, you're both talking a lot about things, the magic of the fact that it changes for Michael, that it converts, and your anticipation and excitement. Claire, so for me, there's something sort of magical and earthy and integral to our humanity, not to put too fine a point on it about Clay. Anyway. Great. So we're going to switch now and we're going to talk about some of your other works. So I'm going to pull up and share my screen in one moment. And we'll start with Claire. So I'm going to leave the screen looking like this. I've actually found it works a little better.
Sure.
Got green either. Okay. So we have some lovely slides by Claire and then for Michael to talk through your current and former work. And we're starting both with the work that's in our exhibition currently. So this is what's in our gallery right now. So I'll just have Claire kind of take it away and talk us through the slides.
Yes, so I'll come back to that piece at the end if you don't mind. Could I maybe start with the next one? Yeah, I'll start with my earlier pieces because it just makes sense. I've sort of done it in sort of in a sort of timeline. So this is one of the first pieces I'd done after art college. So this was around 2001. And digital technologies were just kind of coming to the fore, and digital cameras and digital printing was just the rage at the time. It was also new and exciting. And I had been working for quite a few years in my earlier years at art college doing a lot of wheel-based work. And my intent was to kind of set up the sort of archetypal studio pottery where I was just going to throw pots all day long. And then I took a year out placement and worked in pottery in Italy for a year. And after a year of sort of working in a more factory formulated pottery, I kind of came to the end of it thinking, actually, I don't know if this is what I want to do. So I came back and did my final year in art college and just set the potter's wheel aside, and my work completely changed. And suddenly I was making tiles, I was going up, I was going on walls. And then I started introducing photography to my work. And then I was up and down between the print studios and the ceramic studios making ceramic decals. And then as time went on, I discovered a process for digitally printing onto tiles. So then, so for my degree, so I had a mixture of handmade tiles and also printed tiles. And then after university, I was approached to put in a design for a commission for it would have been quite a central area in Belfast beside the Queen's Bridge. So I then devised so this would have been my first public art piece outside of uni. So it was working with reflecting on the shipyards in Belfast and just the kind of industrial past of Belfast. So if you want to move on, I'll not spend too long on each slide because I know we're restricted for time. So then moving on from that, I got involved in more socially engaged community art practice. Belfast is known, but was known very much so in the past for its paramilitary murals of opposing paramilitary factions in Belfast, both either loyalist or Republican. So the Arts Council at the time devised a funding program called Reimaging Communities. So I was commissioned to create a piece for a wall for an area in North Belfast, Ardoyne, which is quite a socially deprived area. And we worked with children in the primary school, local primary schools and community centres to develop these handmade ceramic tiles to create this huge kind of triptych. A lot of the children had been involved in a very bad case many years ago, the Holy Cross School, where they were sort of being victims of sectarian abuse as they were walking towards their primary school. These were just young children. So a lot of the children that were involved in this actually took part in this project. So I was very keen to kind of create a more positive image for the area and get away from any of the kind of political trappings that are synonymous with these areas, and to kind of just take away. There would have been a heavy duty paramilitary mural on this wall before we took over the project. If you want to just flick to the next slide, I can show you part of it in process. So I created this work over a summer period, and I was able to, I had left our college many years by that point, but I was able to get in and use their facilities over the summer just because I needed big kilns and a big space to lay everything out. So that was just one of the panels with taking all the handmade tiles that the children had made and piecing everything together. So that's that project. Great though it was, it almost killed me physically and mentally. So if I move on then to the next slide, that's probably not a very good image. If you, yeah,
A little blurry, but
yeah, if you flip it on actually to the next image, it'll give you a better, yeah. So then after doing all these large projects, a lot of public art projects can be very, very stressful. You know, there's so many factors that you never think of when you enter into these projects. And also that previous one where physically it really took its toll on me, and I actually damaged my back quite a lot. And I had to sort of review everything I was doing. And you'll sort of find this with my work at Chops and Changes every couple of years. I think I just naturally get kind of bored of one thing and want to move on and do something else. So I wanted to create architectural style pieces, but maybe with a view to keeping them in more internal spaces and to make them maybe a little bit more emotive and ethereal. So I started working in much lighter types of clay. So this was created using flax porcelain paper clay, or flax clay, sorry, which is very lightweight when it's fired. And the backing of this was perspex, and then it was transparent glaze with fused clear glass, and then a little bit of mother of pearl luster. So it was a real departure from stuff that I had been creating before this, and I think it was just something that had changed in me as well. That this business of making these big, huge, hand-built tile pieces, I just kind of realized in my own personal studio space, I was just finding it really difficult to do on my own, and I just wanted to move away from that altogether. So if you want to then pop forward there. So this then would be some of the work that I created in my residency then in the clay studio. So I think it was 2013, almost sure. But yeah, so it was fantastic. You know, I had been admiring the Clay Studios work from afar for a long time. So when the opportunity came up to apply for the residency and I was successful and I got a little bit of funding from the Arts Council, all the stars came into alignment. And so having been out of uni for many years, it was lovely to kind of come to the Clay Studio and have all these beautiful facilities and technical support and a gorgeous glaze lab. It was like sort of Willy Wonka's chocolate factory to me, you know. So I was able to kind of play about, and I think was Theo was the technician at the time. Really guy, really friendly. So he helped me with the mold making. I was never great at mold making. It's never my strong suit. So it was great to have somebody help me there. And so I was able to kind of take the idea of what I'd already started and just roll with that further. So I had these, I got the you call them buoys, I call them boys, but I got a boy, and we created the plaster molds for that, and then cast them up, and then using lots of mason stains and underglazes and things like that, just created a whole array of all these beautiful like incrustations. And so if you want to even move forward to the next slide there. Yeah, so that was just one just on its own. And also too, I'm sort of keen in a way to try and once fire everything, from an economic point of view, and also now an environmental point of view, just to try and keep, we're in a cost of living crisis here at the minute, energy costs are through the roof, and also just, firing kilns twice, loading kilns twice. So there's ways I can do it that I can just once fire. I do try and do that. So these were all once fired, which was great. And then this body of work led on to another exhibition. Then I had followed on later in the year in London. And that was Handmade in Britain, so it was great. So the work that I developed in the clay studio then led on to that, which was great. So it was lovely just to get that departure in my work. So if you want to pop on to the next slide, I'm sort of doing a kind of pocket history of my arts career. You wanted to talk about the art in care, Jennifer. So I've worked for many years. It's now coming up to about 17 years with Arts Care Northern Ireland. So was artist in residence for the Northern Ireland Hospice for about 14 years. And within that time, I was hanging into the job for many years because I knew they were getting ready to rebuild the place. So I was hanging in there, my fingernails going.
Yeah.
I knew at that time, sadly no more, but at that time, the Arts Council had public art funding for new builds. So I put together a big application form with some of the senior managers at the hospice, and luckily enough, we were successful and we got the full funding. And so I came on as integrated public arts coordinator. So we went through a whole process. So we commissioned lots of different artists covering loads of different mediums. We had a sonic arts garden. We had paint, photography. We had fused glass windows, everything you could sort of think of, we managed to squeeze into this new build. But what it was an old Victorian building that was basically stripped off and a brand new building kind of attached to the back of it. So it still had its old Victorian facade. And then this was the entrance into one area of the building. And obviously, when people are approaching a building for palliative care services for the first time, it can be terrifying because just the word in itself means, you're heading towards, your end game soon. So we were trying to create a really warm and welcoming environment, trying to destigmatize the word hospice. So if you want to pop on to the next slide. So this piece is called Before the Bloom. And again, my interest in marrying technologies with traditional crafts. I worked with a company called Donai Plastics, and then I worked with Balik Potteries, which is, world famous, very traditional. I'm sure most people in America would be aware of Balik, pretty popular in the States. But anyway, so the guys in Balik were lovely. They were really, really, Fergus Cleary, who's the head of design up there, was very gracious. So I had gone to the plastics company with my Frankenstein model of what I wanted to do. We created it in CAD. And so the vertical planes on the bud, some are created with pastel perspex and the rest are created with modular pieces of Parian clay that we created in Balik. So if you pop on to the next slide, you'll see what I mean. So these were the perspex positives that we created at Donite Plastics. And then if you pop on to the next slide, then these were all the molds that Balik graciously and lovingly helped me create and make up at their studio in Enniskillen. So that was fantastic. And if you pop onto the next slide, you can see then where I've joined the Parian modular pieces onto like a plastic armature. And then that is created. So the piece is completely lit from inside. So the whole idea that the light would diffuse out through the Parian, out through the soft pastel perspex, and then that drops down into the foyer of the healthcare entrance, hopefully making it a nice place for people if they come in in a bed, if they come in a wheelchair, they can kind of look up and see this kind of a joyous piece. And also just to uplift staff as well who are working in very sensitive and stressful areas. So that was a huge piece. So to me, that was a kind of culmination of me trying to marry the public art, but also trying to marry this kind of delicate approach to the public art so that it wasn't so heavy-handed, and again had this kind of light, ethereal quality that would be uplifting. So if you want to pop on to the next picture. So this is a picture of an antique Balik teapot, their limpet teapot. I from that project I did with the hospice, Blake, I worked with Blake a couple of times after that. I did a residency in Australia at the Fremantle Arts Centre, where I recreated a contemporary version of their Neptune cup and saucer. I don't have the images here, but I wanted to kind of keep things succinct because I know a short of time. Um, but it was coming up to the centenary of the formation of the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, which was essentially the separation of Ireland as a country from one to the other. And that was in 2021. And it was just after COVID. And I had started thinking about how ideally, I would have liked to have had it done for 2021, but it didn't quite happen like that. And so I started coming up with ideas of how I wanted to relate that story. And Ballick in itself has such an interesting story in terms of the dynamic of Ireland. Ballick sits right on the border of the north and the south. You could literally walk down the street and across a bridge and you're into the Republic of Ireland. Ballick was set up as almost like as a reaction to the Irish famine to give people employment. And it's one of those places. So it's witnessed the partition of Ireland, it's witnessed the First World War, Second World War. It's been, and it's still going and it's still there and it's still functioning. So I wanted in some way to kind of marry some of the traditions of that, but again, bridging it with new technologies. If you pop onto the next image, and so I was thinking of how Ireland at the moment where we are now is kind of at a bit of a interesting moment. I'm sure Michael will attest to that, where we in the north, for the first time ever, have an Irish Republican First Minister. That it's always been more of a loyalist majority that have ruled the north, and now that is changing and starting to go the other way, and it's creating a type of tension, which just last night in my local area, not far from where I live, there are young teenagers from both sides of the community popping shots at each other and doing stuff, that things are going on that you wouldn't hear in international news, but it's still very much happening in the underbelly of more socially deprived areas in cities. So to me, it felt like there's like a pressure starting to build again and a tension in the politics here. But then as time went on, it just became a bigger story to me. It became like, well, it's not just about here. Then Ukraine happened, and it's like, oh my God. And then Israel and Palestine. And it's just this crazy amount of conflict happening everywhere in the world. And then if you pop onto the next slide and then pop back to the very first one. So if you go right back to the first one, yeah. So these teapots that I've created are a culmination and a combination of a teapot and a pressure cooker. And the whole idea of the pressures of trying to keep dialogue continuing through conflict, and the importance of keeping the dialogue continuing through conflict. And I had sort of taken that kind of rippled effect of the kind of limpet teapots and a few other sort of antique teapots that Ballick produced, and merging those ideas of these kind of old traditional pressure cookers where they're literally clamped and tied down. And I just wanted to sort of showcase that tension between that idea of war and peace, but also when I had completed the pieces and I set them up, and somebody just walked into the room and said, they look like hand grenades. And so I was like, yeah, that was not my intention for them to look like that, but it's interesting how something turns out. So yeah, so to me, they represent that, just that tension within conflict and the importance of dialogue. So that's kind of where my work has kind of come up to just more recently. And yeah, and then I've just also recently started a new post with the Arts Council of Northern Ireland. So it's interesting now. For many years, I've been a recipient of awards and things like that, but now I'm on the other side. So it's getting to see an overview, more of a bird's eye view of the overarching arts scene in Northern Ireland, which is very interesting. But yeah, so I developed these pieces for an exhibition originally a few months ago. So then when the Clay Studio got in touch, I thought, yeah, this is very apt time then to be able just to send some new work over.
Yeah.
So I'm pleased they've been able to do that. But I know you're conscious of time, so I'll not rattle on too much. But I
Well,
hope that gives
I mean, I
a
could
quick
talk about all of
overview.
this for hours with you because just the idea that you're working with the historic factory and that you didn't, the idea of it looks like a hand grenade and you didn't realize at first. There's so much more. We'll have a little bit of time at the end for more deep questions and conversation. Um, yeah, and I was just going to say it's nice to be on the end of giving the money away rather than begging for it, probably. But we can talk about that later too. Thank you, Claire. That was lovely. So
Thank you. Thanks.
your overview. Thank you so much. Okay, Michael. So I started with the picture of your piece that's in our show now, and then some of the images that you sent, and then I do have a picture of one of your pieces in the collection
No.
over here at the end. So do you want to talk a little bit about this one, or would you rather talk about it at the end?
No, I'll start in sequence. That's absolutely fine. Thanks,
Yeah.
Jennifer, and thank you, Claire, for that journey. And I certainly do tune into it as others would from this island in terms of how things have transitioned and how delicate it all can be. This piece, I actually was commissioned for a solo exhibition in Northern Ireland just coming out of lockdown. And I was looking at sort of locations and maps and kind of different kind of transitions that inspired these works. And this piece has a sort of this folding process that I hadn't really used before in these sort of slab built and highly polished and really very small forms. It's only a little handheld piece called Aviator, and that links back to Philadelphia, actually, Jennifer, it's why I sent it to you, because it's coming from that body of work that did start and linked very closely to the shipyards in Philadelphia, which I can connect to Bill Daly, who's the sort of legend of Philadelphian ceramics, who actually we had a lovely visit in the clay studio when I was there. Bill came out, and just to tack on the sort of, I'm going backwards now, but many years ago I got a letter from Les Manning in Canada, who just had dinner with Bill Daly in his sort of later years in 2001, and said to Bill, "What haven't you done?" And he said, "I haven't visited Ireland." So Les wrote to me. And thanks to the National College of Art and Design and the College of Art in Belfast, where I was only appointed a year later, we made it happen. So Bill got to come to Ireland, and he arrived on St. Patrick's Day. Couldn't have put it together better.
He is just I miss him all the time. I think he's just the best person and ever. Anyway, go ahead.
Yes, and as a student, like Bill's drawing, the way he makes ceramics was highly influential. And it's one of the reasons I didn't glaze work for a very long time, because I love the sort of natural nature of the clay. So underpinning this comes from, I was only reading about it again this morning. There's an English artist and critic called John Berger, who wrote about watching a kitten play. And when it got tired, the kitten was white, and when it got tired, it would sleep, but it would always find somewhere white to sleep on. So when it closed its eyes, it disappeared. So that notion of these things emerging and coming back and forth is very much part of this series of works. The sort of visual play of what's camouflaged and not camouflaged. If we can go on to the next slide, please. And I actually can't really see the sequence of these, so my apologies.
I'll show you real quick.
Okay.
And we'll go back.
Yes, go back to that, please. The camouflage piece. Yeah.
Oh, the camouflage piece. Okay.
So that was made no, excuse me, it was made in the Belfast School of Art, but it was right on the back of my time in Philadelphia. So this notion of things merging and appearing and reappearing, it's not an interest in war and conflict for me. It's an interest in that optical play, which is where things can advance and recede. That definitely came from my time with Bill and my time in Philadelphia, sort of traveling along those shipyards. It's what is it, Delaware Expressway. I used to go out there and take a look at all of these things, and then see Bill's pieces at the Ritz Cinema. Just wonderful. So that all of that kind of ties up, and that's very much why, Jennifer, I sent the Aviator piece to you, because it really does connect with that time in Philadelphia. If we can go back to my second slide of the run, coming out of lockdown. Well, it was before lockdown, but this idea of actually making pieces from scraps of clay is something I started in 2017. I was really impeded. I didn't have a lot of movement in 2017 physically. So I would sit at this tiny bench and just use fragments of clay to construct and reconstruct as I was reconstructing myself in a way. And then sort of started to sort of dive into using these amber glazes that we use. You might remember that glaze, Claire, because we've been making that glaze in the School of Art for as long as I've been there, and it's one that's working really beautifully for me. And a departure for me with these ones is they're wall mounted as well. So if we could go to the next slide. Yes, you'll see these kind of architectural inspirations are coming through, but there's also, the stone walls, the maps, the bogs, the marks in the landscape. As a cyclist, I see all of these things with rivers and canals and that sort of movement. And those moments when you're making where you're completely lost in making. That's where I go when I'm making these, because it's just, I draw a lot, as I said earlier, but I don't draw these exactly. I just allow them to happen in the workspace. And just, so there's a lovely spontaneity to that I sort of really value. Can we try the next slide there, please? This again is part of that. This one, the name of it is not coming to me now. It'll come to me in a second. Torque. That's the name of this piece. Again, it's coming from a very recent piece, 2000 and it would be 2021, 22. Again, very small, but it's got that sort of twisted, torqued quality, highly polished surfaces. And again, going back to the John Berger disappearing kitten, I love the fact that these things emerge and as you move around these, that sort of three-dimensional quality and that three-dimensional thinking that was instilled to me as a student. The way these advance and recede is just is something that really drives how I make these pieces. So if it's a very busy piece, and I would consider this a very busy piece, I tend to leave glaze away from it. There's enough visually going on. If it's a more neutral piece or maybe a stiller piece, I would then look at that kind of camouflaging or using colored glazes. Can we see where we are with the next slide, please? Same piece, yeah. So you can see that play with light is happening with these. And these are once fired. Claire, you'd mentioned that. Obviously, I do a second firing for glazing, but years ago I used to raw glaze, and I'd be interested in getting back to that because I was in a small, tiny studio with a small kiln that's actually in Alex Scott's kiln in studio right now, I think. But it was all about the finances of just, if I could raw glaze, it just cost less, Next slide, please. Again, this is the one in Philadelphia, I believe. Is it, Jennifer?
Yep,
Very good.
that's right.
Yeah,
Yep.
sorry. Yes, again, we're looking at that sort of recession advancing, that shadow play, that kind of the power of that heavy white malachite clay that's really sort of jumping forward and back. Yeah, that's what's that there about. Next slide, please.
I think it's that one. Yeah.
Okay, and then we have our camouflage. Yeah. And actually, in the background here, I have one of Bill Daly's drawings. I thought it was nice to sort of recognize and remember him from 2002. And that whole visit of Philadelphia and the clay studio was so central. Alexander Calder was a surprise when I got to Philadelphia. There's a very large piece of one of Calder's cactus outside the Arts Block in Trinity College. And then I obviously with his connection to the Philadelphia Art Museum. But when I moved to France, I ended up living in the town very close to where he lived in 1991. And he donated a huge amount of his work to the Musée des Beaux-Arts in Tours. So back in 91, I was looking at Calder's sculptures. When I was a student in NCAD, we were still near the Trinity campus, so I was looking at Calder's sculptures. So it was an absolute thrill to get to that line of the sort of three generations of Calder sculptors with the William Penn and then the fountain piece, to see that sort of lineage go all the way straight through the heart of Philadelphia was just such a really, really strong connection for me. So I kind of wanted to stress those pieces in terms of the really significant, I was only in Philadelphia for a summer, but it really was a pivotal time to make. And I think one of the things I really wanted to stress today was it's rare that you get, and particularly with an architectural and an urban inspiration in my practice, it's rare that you get an urban clay studio experience. And yours is the only studio in my recollection of clay residencies where I haven't been in the countryside. And I've been in some really amazing residencies abroad, but it's the urban experience of something that I felt was very, very interesting and very powerful for my time in Philadelphia. Can we try the next slide?
Oh, I think that that was all.
Okay, no, we're good with that. That's absolutely
Yeah.
fine.
But I was
Yeah,
just say the Calder, the one in the museum is called Ghost, and it's
yes,
just white, so it has so much resonance with
there you go.
work. And
Yeah,
I love that
absolutely.
you just told the story about the three generations, because I tell people that on every tour that I give of the city.
Oh, very good.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, we have, if for those who don't know, the City Hall is topped by a 37-foot tall sculpture of William Penn that's by Alexander Calder, and then his son, also Alexander Calder, designed a fountain, and then along the art parkway further in the art museum is where um, Sandy, where the most recent Alexander Calder's mobile is. And just so you know, they're finally building the Calder Museum on the parkway.
Ah,
Along there now there'll be a whole museum for Alexander Calder's work,
fantastic.
the
Yeah,
young one. So that's
yeah.
another reason for you to come back.
Yeah,
Um,
oh, well, certainly, yeah, yeah,
for
and it
these,
is such it's a lovely and kind of genuine story. It's just you can't make those kind of things up. It's just it's that generational lineage is incredible.
and that I could go on and on about architecture, but anyway, this does this have any relation to have you seen the images of the battleships from World War II that are, I can't remember if it's
Well,
called,
see, that's
yeah.
where the research went, Jennifer. I went straight from, and it's actually there's even they were even doing it in World War One, but
Oh, okay.
from that experience of the Delaware Parkway, going to see those sort of huge ships, to the kind of camouflage, optical Berger merging, advancing. I really made a big leap when I made these pieces, and as a person who's still learning. I
Yeah,
really made a big leap in my work, because up to that it was primarily the color of the clay. So this
yeah.
is my first time, and you can see it's very controlled and it's still very kind of rigid.
Mm.
But and now you see, going back to when I was a teenager, my brother who's at this talk will remember, um, like I did calligraphy in school, so that mark making was something that's has suddenly just reappeared in the clay studio.
Yeah.
And I went straight to dazzle camouflage as a research topic after that, and it's fascinating. And what I love about dazzle camouflage is it's not actually to make something disappear. It's actually to alter your perception of where it is and how far away it is. So I'm telling you probably what you already know.
No, I'm glad you're saying it for, no, it's good.
Yes, yes. You can actually disrupt the direction you think something is going in, and I love that optical play that Berger writes about, and then that sort of manifests itself in that dazzled camouflage. Yeah, so that's exactly where the research went
Mm.
after I left the play studio. Yeah.
If anyone hasn't looked up dazzle camouflage, please, you're doing yourself a favor. Do it now. It's amazing.
Mhm.
That's so great. And I want to pause for questions, but again, I could talk to you for another hour about Bill Daly and all that kind of stuff. So that's the
Thank
good and
you.
bad of these programs. They're always exciting, but I wish we could talk longer. Does anyone on Zoom, and here you have a brother in here, and who else is with us? Does anyone want to make a comment or ask a question? Feel free. Anyone in the room? Questions? No, I have lots more questions. Anybody? Okay, well, tell me about when Bill came to Ireland. Was it so fun to be
Well,
with?
he did. For those of you that don't know, Bill has this kind of workshop with students. And funny, I was reading about him yesterday, Jennifer. He actually classifies himself as an educator first and an artist second. I was quite surprised to read that, because but that's how his devotion. And let's not forget McCarthyism. He resigned from teaching positions over the treatment of his colleagues and peers who are wrongly accused of being communist. The guy was shot down in the Second World War as an 18-year-old
Mm.
pilot. So that's just the wealth of stories and the wealth of knowledge. But yeah, we arranged the trip. He did one workshop session with students in Belfast, and Peter Meanley, as Claire would remember, Peter sort of facilitated that. I wasn't in academia at the time. I was a sort of go-between, because I knew Les Manning from Canada, who was a friend of Bill's, and suggested that we get Bill over to Ireland. And as I say, it was that Les over dinner said, "Well, Bill, it's you're retired now. What haven't you done?" And he says, "I've never been to Ireland."
Yeah,
So we made it happen.
yeah.
And that's when he very kindly, he did that drawing in a hotel room in Dublin, and then just handed it to me the next morning. And then we sat in on on the workshop with the NCAD students in the, well, I would have called it the sort of glazed plaster area, but he just rolled out his slabs and did this phenomenal card, newspaper, clay construction
Yeah.
in the space. And then, we just became tourists for a couple of days then, and we just drove around the Dublin mountains and out to the seaside and through the city.
Oh, that's
And
great.
it was
I'm
yeah.
jealous.
And then it was, sorry, after that was when I then met him again in Philadelphia in the clay studio.
That's great. So great. Lovely. What a lovely memory. Claire, I wanted to ask you about your work with the factory when you were working with Balik. You know,
Mhm.
I just had the pleasure of visiting the Kohler factory that's here in the US
Mhm.
in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, and they have a residency, which I think both of you should, I think everybody should apply for this residency. You get to go into the factory and make your work, but you use the slip casting of the toilets that they make and the faucets. They have an iron foundry. It's amazing. What do you feel, what was like your big takeaway from working with the people on the factory floor?
I mean, it's kind of amazing. Like the workshop, the traditional workshop literally has not changed since the 1800s. You know, it is literally the same space. You see old pictures on the walls and you look around and it's like, oh, yeah, it's exactly the same. There's a little bit of electricity and that's about it. Um, well, they were just really supportive, you know. I mean, I would never have been able to make the pieces. It just wouldn't have happened if they hadn't have got on board. And so I worked up with the design team, which is kind of up the stairs for a few weeks while we created the molds themselves. So they have like a master mold maker there, which is fantastic. I'm always happy to latch on to somebody that is really good at something that can help me. So that was great. And then working down in the Parian shop itself. So there's some of the guys that have worked there and they've been there, you know, since they were young boys, really. And they're just fantastic how quickly they work, you know, and you just have this kind of like big tap of Parian clay that you just squeeze out like a hose. And, you know, it's just, oh, it just makes it so fantastic and huge kilns and just everything is just, and they're so lovely, you know, they're so friendly and it's such an idyllic setting, you know, it's right on the river.
Mm.
And then it's Gillen that just on the borders with Donegal. So, you know, it's also a really beautiful place as well. So for the first while I went up and stayed there sort of Monday to Fridays and then realized like all of these projects is going to take way longer than I had originally imagined. So then there was a lot of getting up at 5 in the morning and driving off from Belfast to be there early when the guys start in the factory because it was better to start when they're all there and then leave when they're all leaving, you know. So yeah,
Mm.
so it took a long time, but I mean it was an amazing experience. And then uh, I was allowed to go up again then when I was entering into the my recreation of the Neptune cup and saucer, you know. So that was a lovely time too. And then I was able to take those molds over to the Fremantle Art Centre in Australia.
Mm.
I work with them over there. You know, I've had a nice relationship with Balik, but the latest pieces that I've done, I actually, even though I was influenced by Balik, I didn't go up to Balik this time just simply because I just haven't got the time to go up and, because every day up there I don't have an income or whatever, you know, so it just was too expensive. So I enlisted the mold making skills of another fantastic ceramic artist who's based in Belfast, John Rainey. So he's like, he does the digital CAD, he prints. So again, I come up with my Frankenstein image of what I wanted. And then it was over COVID, so we were working remotely. And so we were getting online and we were working on CAD design. So we were designing it on computers and he was sending me the PDFs and all that. And then we sort of met up in parks in Belfast and stuff. It was ridiculous because of the whole COVID situation. It's like we were like spies meeting in the park with our masks on and and then eventually so he created a 3D model of the teapot in like a sort of rubber plastic 3D printer.
Mm.
And then from that, then he helped create because like a super complex mold. There's just no way. I mean, there's mold making and then there's mold making, and you need to be a master class person in that particular area to construct the mold.
Mm.
So yeah, so all that leaning, all the learning from Balik filtered into the traditional, and then again, I've segued into using digital technologies to help me create the same effect, but just closer to home.
Yeah.
Just to flag it there. Sorry, Jennifer. We clearly be interested. We've just agreed a live project with Belique for our second year design students who are
Fantastic.
specializing in ceramics.
Great.
So we'd lost that connection. We used to place students there years ago.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
we may put together a PhD topic on the Belique collection as well. That's
Mm.
sort of still in negotiation, but we're starting a live project with them now in
Yes,
September.
yeah. Well, Wendy Ward, was it Wendy was up
Oh,
doing,
yes, sir.
she
I
was
remember
doing
Wendy
her,
well. Yeah.
yeah, she was doing an Arts Council ACES project up there. So at the time when I was there, but yeah, it needs funded though. You know, it's difficult for students to
Yeah.
just go up and down from Belize. But yeah, an amazing experience because it really is like it's like stepping back in time
Mm.
into the old processes. Yeah, amazing. And they were just really, really supportive.
It's great. Well, and it's so interesting that you went back to the historical and now you're working with a we're just about to launch our digital production studio. We
Oh
got
wow,
a grant.
yeah.
Yeah, so we hired a studio manager for that, and we have a bunch of 3D printers in boxes all over the office, including in my little tiny office. But hopefully in the fall it's going to be up and running. Um, so I know we're over time already, but you, thank you, Claire. You sort of, I think, told us what's next for you. You are welcome to add in a moment, but Michael, do you have 1 minute of what's next? And then we can.
Well, I sort of work in bursts, which isn't ideal for material handling. Um, but it's sort of more sustainable. So at the minute, we were just coming out of a block of teaching and learning. So I'm really just looking forward to making things and maybe having a little chat with you about future residencies. The project I have with Mark in Cambridge is something that I'm very in. That's really going. Well, it's taken a lot of focus. We've hit a few speed bumps, but we're going to meet again soon. And this is about drawing artists together who are going to respond visually and creatively to the creative friendship between Seamus Heaney, Barry Cook, who's a painter based in Kilkenny,
Mhm.
and a poet laureate, Ted Hughes. And all of that archive is in Pembroke College, Cambridge. So, which takes me no time to get to because you just fly from Dublin to Stansted and you get on the train. So, back into that is something, and like Heaney talked about, he would dig with his pen. There's this lovely physicality to that work, and it's an archive of drawing. It's an archive. You're handling written poems and drawings by all these amazing artists. So yeah, there'll be new work coming as a response to that for sure.
Great. Claire, a minute on what's next?
Yeah, well, a bit like Michael, just with the way I work, I don't always get the chance to get into my studio for concentrated time. And at the moment with the new job, I'm sort of on a bit of a learning curve for that. So I think once that plateaus out a bit, it'll give me a little bit more headspace then to kind of take further. But I'll still be working with what I'm working with at the minute, but just taking it another step further and seeing where that goes, really.
Great. Well, it's been a pleasure to talk with you both. The hour flew by, as I knew it would. Thank you for sharing your evening with us and your artwork and for making the decision to be artists every day and putting wonderful art in the world. Thank you so much.
Jennifer,
Thank you
thanks for
very
the
much,
invite.
Jennifer. Thank you.
Really
And thank
enjoyed
you
it.
everyone
Thanks.
for coming along.
Yeah,
Okay.
thanks for taking time to talk to us today and be with us. Thank you.
Great. Thanks
Thank
to
you.
everyone who came today. Thanks everybody.
Take care.
One.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheerio.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.